Hey, my name is ShawNshawN. I sell art on ShawNshawN.co and screen reading on ShawNshawNacting.com. Today we're going to review Don't Breathe 2. So this is a film by Rodo, Sayagues. Time is 1 hour and 38 minutes. I never saw the first one, I don't think. I don't think you need to. This kind of follows straightforward, succinct story that you can follow by itself. Actors are Stephen Lang as Norman Nordstrom, this kind of mysterious ex-SEAL grandfather figure. Madelyn plays Phoenix, this young girl that's being raised by her grandfather Norman Nordstrom. Sexton 3 plays Raylan. Stephanie Arcila plays Hernandez. Rocci plays Duke. So the story is this young girl. It starts off, she just barely escapes a house fire. She collapses. And then they fast forward 8 years later, and she's doing kind of a survival training camp with her grandfather. And she's like, why do I have to keep doing this? Like, no, you don't understand. We need to really do this. I'm homeschooling you. It's to be great. She's like, I want to go with kids my own age. He's like, oh, maybe next year. And so he's very protective. So there's kind of this mysterious background of why he's so protective. Why is he training her all these crazy survival skills? And it turns out later he's a SEAL. So you're like, oh, that makes sense. He's a SEAL. So why not train your granddaughter how to survive? That'd be smart in case anything terrible happens. And also at the same time, there's this story in the city where there's all these kids being kidnapped for organ harvesting. And so it makes sense that he would kind of start that training to protect her. So it's a really great actor build at that time. Itchy hair. So the girl goes off, they're playing around after the survival thing, and this lady shows up and she kind of does nursery delivery, and I guess Norman does a little bit of, he's doing some bush replanting or selling her plant. Oh no, he actually he's a gardener and he's selling her plants for the nursery. And she's like, hey, maybe you can let your little girl go along with, she'd have a fun time. And he's like, no, we really shouldn't. And then he's like, fine, I'll let her go because, she's right. She needs to socialize a little bit more with, females and other people. The little girl's like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom. She goes in the bathroom and she sees this really weird guy come out. And then it's like, oh God, this guy's going to kidnap her right there. And she gets by him because she has this great big dog with her, which is the grandfather's dog. So she has some protection, no problem. They get into the van, they're fine. And they get all the way back to the house, drops off the girl. And on the way back, Hernandez, the girl that's driving the nursery truck, she gets stopped by this van and they're blocking the road. There's only one way out. So she's, oh shit. So she goes and approaches the van. There's like 4 guys. She's like, hey, can you move your truck? You're blocking the way. And they're like, we don't want to do it. And then she's like, pulls up and shows her gun. They're like, all right, we'll back off. So she gets back to her truck. She looks fine. Takes her gun out, put it in the trunk, and then the guy starts strangling her and kills her. You're like, oh my God, this is like a really nice character and just got brutally killed. You're like, oh my God, these guys are horrible people, And so for there, they go to the house and, hunt the girl down, and the grandfather fights them off kind of story. So what I really liked about this story is they kind of use a little bit of tactics from A Quiet Place. So A Quiet Place is a really well-known horror film where they use kind of different levels of sound background, and they had like a deaf girl in the movie. When it was from her perspective, they completely cut the sound, and you have the monster one in the background. It's super scary because she can't hear the monster, so she makes any sound. She doesn't even know she's triggered the monster. And so in this film, they use a lot of lack of sound, so it's much better than your average, I think, horror film that uses music all the way through. So it's really good if you kind of drop the music almost to nothing, just a little bit, and they use just that right amount, I think. They might have been able to do a little bit more, but I think they did a really good job of making it super creepy when the intruders enter the house and it's really quiet. The blind guy, he's really receptive by sound, so it makes sense to kind of drop it to only the background sound. He's kind of reacting by the sounds. And so that's really kind of a cool aspect of the film, and they use it quite a bit. So I think that's pretty good. They could have used it a little bit more, I think, to make it even more creepier, but overall I think they did a really good job, which makes it better than the average horror film, which would have great background music, but just probably a little bit too much. You can actually use a lack of music to really drum up the drama. There's this great theme of honorable soldier who's a SEAL versus dishonorable soldiers from Iraq War, and you kind of have this generation gap between, he probably fought, I don't know, the one Iraq War 1, or maybe he fought before that in Korea. Probably Korea he fought, supposedly. Although he'd be pretty old by then, so I'm not sure which war he fought. Because he fought in Korea, that's like in the 50s, and it's like, 40, 60 years later, it's like, how old would this guy be, right? Would he even be able to do anything? So it's like, what war was between... Well, there was Vietnam in the 70s, so maybe he's a Vietnam vet, I'm not sure. But Vietnam wasn't a really good war either. There's a lot of dishonorable acts in Vietnam, so it's like, how did you be a SEAL in Vietnam but not come back alive? Who knows? But there's kind of like this, paradigm between good soldier, bad soldier, which is a really good backdrop for how you get back from the war and you kind of adjust to society, not fully, but you try to recover yourself as a good soldier. But if you're a bad soldier, you might become this terrible criminal gang, which these other soldiers have done. So it's kind of that quandary of how do you handle your PTSD in the film. As his grandfather has rescued this girl, he's becoming a better and better person by taking care of his granddaughter, or so we think. There's great misdirection in the story. There's 2 times. First you think it goes one way, and then they flip it, and you're like, oh my god, are the villains the good guys? And then they flip back, no, the villains are the villains, right? So it's a great twist of you're thinking, who's the villain in this film, right? So it's a really nice twist. I think they could have done maybe a slightly better job of making the parents of the kids seem a little better, but obviously they're cooking meth and all kind of craziness, so they're kind of your typical terrible drug dealers, right? Yeah, and they have this theme of the girls always being trained for survival training. You're like, why is he training her so much? And then when the kidnapper showed up, you're like, oh, maybe he was, prepping her, and he had this backstory for there's a gang in the city kind of organ harvesting kids, which is horrible. So it makes sense that he's training her for survival skills after you kind of get that through. But it's kind of nice peeling back of the onion. It's kind of like a little bit of a mystery until you get deeper into the story. So there's a really nice kind of story unfolding, kind of twists and turns in the story. And if you want to put on your tinfoil hat, this could actually be a propaganda film by China to suggest organ harvesting in the U.S. when actually there's organ harvesting in China. Or they set the scene in the U.S. because they would never get away with talking about it in China. Either way, it's, who's the sponsor of the film kind of thing, the money behind it. It's a good thing they talk about it, but then you talk about it in America, it's kind of like, yeah, it happens here, but it's really the issue in China. So it's kind of like anyone knows on the black market trade, you just fly to China, you get any organ you want because they're just literally harvesting people for any kind of body parts. So it's interesting they touch on this topic a little bit. So they're kind of subtly going about it. I don't know if they're trying to sneak it in under the CCP radar to sell it in China, or just be blocked. They know they're going to be blocked, so maybe they had a lower budget right off the bat. Or it's actually a film by China to kind of escape the criticism of the organ harvesting. Who knows? But it's an interesting topic to cover, because it is a terrible thing and that's really happening in the real world. There's this interesting dichotomy too with the good soldier, bad soldier, killing dogs, or trying to protect a attacking dog that's even trying to kill you, but you try to, keep the dog. It's not his fault that he's trained by bad trainers. So it's kind of, again, this good versus bad, evil dichotomy in the film, which is really nicely played out. There's also this good hand-to-hand combat with the vet, through the house, and versus the intruders, which is, kind of believable. The thing I think that throws me off is there's a second scene where they go to the hospital in the end scene, the third act, and you're like, how would the blind guy be able to get around there? He doesn't know the floor plan laid out. I don't know, maybe he'd be able to figure it out kind of, but you're blind. So if you don't know the layout, you don't know the layout, right? And you can't just study it. You can't, you can see it coming, and so you don't know what the bodyguards are and all that stuff. So that's a little bit unbelievable. He'd definitely be sneaky, but I don't know how sneaky he'd be, because how would he know how close he is to the actual source of where the girl's being held or not? So kind of a little bit of a throw there. Anyway, I recommend a pretty good film. I recommend it. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And hope to see you on the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.